So much of the aggression in our times, every newspaper, every TV show is talking about saving the world with fake food. You know, just like half a century ago, they brought fake fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers, and said we won't be able to feed the world without fake fertilizers. And they synthesized nitrogen by fixing atmospheric nitrogen through burning fossil fuels. Then they said we won't save the world without having GMOs. And now they're saying we won't save the world without you eating fake food. Now, if there wasn't a history of the consequences of fake narratives, on the one hand, and on the other hand, so much thinking in science, in practice, of what food is. This exercise of fakeness, of saying those people who are financing this, because no one shifts to fake food on their own. No one shifts to GMOs on their own. These are always forced. So fake food will have to be forced. And the worldview that's being created is farming without farmers, food without farms. Of course, farming is what farmers do. And till recently, half of humanity anyway, I think more than half of humanity even today, does agriculture, especially if you go to the south. In India, they've been trying to force the farmers off the land ever since globalization, the Green Revolution. And yet 60% of Indians still are rural and live on the land, are farmers, are dependent on the land. So this farming without farmers and food without farms basically is food from labs. But food from labs doesn't come out of thin air. It still needs feedstock. And from the experience we have had, each escalation of the artificial is an escalation of external inputs. You use more resources, you use more energy to produce worse outputs. So, India has had deep thinking. I mean, when I was busy doing quantum theory, I wasn't reading all this amazing stuff. But when the food question became urgent to me after 1984, when the Green Revolution in Punjab had led to so much destruction that the farmers rose in revolt. 15,000 people were killed in what happened after that. Then the Golden Temple had to be invaded, which is a sacred shrine of the Sikhs. And that same year, pesticide plant of Union Carbide leaked in the city of Bhopal, killed thousands. The gas just went through in the middle of the night, winter night, killing, and people are still dying. And 10 of my sisters have gone on a hunger strike to say, when will you give justice to Bhopal? It's the women who've been... This is 1984. We are in 2023. Next year will be 40 years. So these two things shook me up and I wanted to understand. So I studied the Green Revolution. And then I started to follow ecological farming, in which there's so many schools. I think the deepest thinking is in the biodynamic. The most organized practices are in the organic, because it's got EFOAM, it's got standards, it's got certification. It had Albert Howard. Albert Howard was sent to India by the British in 1905 to improve Indian agriculture, because that's what the colonizers had to do, to always improve us. And he arrived, but he was a good scientist. And he could see with his eyes, these soils are so fertile. I cannot teach the peasants how to improve their practices. And he found the fields were full of insects, but there was no pest damage. So he said, I'm going to make the pest and the peasant my professor to learn good farming. As a result of which he wrote the book, The Agricultural Testament, which is what basically guides the organic movement. But we've been eating. Every being eats. To be alive means to eat. And when I started to investigate deeper more recently, I did a whole book on food and health and its links. I went back to writings of people who were looking much more at the spiritual values of food, at the ecological values of food. And I just want to open by sharing with some quotes. So I've come to the conclusion that the web of life is a food web. That food is a flow, it's a currency. Food is not stuff. Food is not a thing. Food is definitely not junk. And food is not a commodity. So the web of life is a food web, and the cycle of life is a food cycle called the nutrition cycle. Everyone knows the nutrition cycle is vital. It's a food cycle. And this is regenerative agriculture. So, in one of our Upanishads, it says, Anna is food. A-N-N-A is a word for food in Hindi, in Sanskrit. It says, for it is of Anna that indeed all beings are born. And it is from Anna that they obtain the necessary sustenance for living. And having lived, it is into Anna they merge at the end. And that's the soil. Yeah? And the best is, everything is food. Every being is made of food. Every being is someone else's food. Immediately, we realize we are part of the web of life. We are members of an earth family. And this, 300-400 years of craziness, of thinking we are top of the pyramid. Other beings are below us. They're just objects to be manipulated, objects to be exterminated and pushed to extinction. That thinking is actually not that old. That mechanical thinking began with Mr. Descartes and Mr. Bacon. And they were given the job of creating sciences of conquest. Bacon was the Chancellor of England. And in the time when he was the Chancellor, he was also in charge of the Inquisition, the witch hunts. So he took that whole interrogating the witches into a scientific method and said it's torture of nature that allows us to know her secrets. You've got to subjugate nature. You've got to make her your slave. And so we have a very violent way of thinking in a mechanistic way and a reductionist way.